Hey guys, this is Daniel Dr. D, and for those of you who have been following my channel, you'll know that we've been working on that Clips Otis Endeavor project, and it's still not over. We got some really cool stuff in the mix, but in the meantime, I just want to update you guys on what's going on at the studio at the Open Baffle speakers. And for those of you who may recall, OCD Mikey Hi-Fi Guy came in and critiqued it. And Bob applied some of those suggestions, most of those suggestions, and I think it really worked effectively. And so the first thing, if you remember, Bob has a three-way tower speaker. And so the top driver is a full-range 8-inch driver from Lee Audio. And then the middle driver is also a Lee Audio full-range driver. And the bottom of the subs is, they're bi-amp separately, and those are 18-inch subs, and they're open baffle subs. So Bob replaced the underpowered bass amp with the Crown K2 amp, and that amp has like 500 watts per channel into 8 ohms, and that provided much more power across the subs at 60 hertz. And as you'll hear, this was it was a major improvement. The Crown K2 is well known for being a great, sub amp. The next thing Bob added was an 18-inch self-powered sub, okay? And this kind of provides a visceral experience for like subterranean bass. It's not like musical type of effect that we're producing here. It's just something that you feel, and it just fills in little gaps. And this is near field bass that we're talking about, because the position of that subwoofer is right next to the listening area, and you'll see that as the video proceeds. The next thing, and lastly, were the Silver 8s, the Lee Audios. And we started to realize that they just weren't filling in the top end or the middle positions. They just weren't hitting the spots that we really wanted in the high frequencies as much as we would have preferred. So Bob added some super tweeters that Al made over at Tec Labs, and we're shocked, at the improvement with it. And you don't really realize it until you compare the two together. And for those of you not familiar with these super tweeters, you're just like adding subs, except you're adding in like additional tweeters of high frequency. Basically the same thing, but just at the opposite end of the frequency spectrum. So we'll proceed with the video, and you'll see that as we go along. So here Bob had been experimenting with all these various super tweeters that some of you guys may have seen online and other, YouTube channels and whatnot. But basically had determined that we just couldn't get the volume that was necessary with these various types of super tweeters that were available. So that idea got ditched, and Bob just ended up going with these really amazing tweeters from Al over at Tec Labs. This particular model here is a 7-inch model, and you can see me adjusting the knob here. And what this thing runs from is 5,000 hertz on up to whatever your ears can hear. That knob that you see me rotating basically allows you to alter the volume, so you can decide how much you want to put in there. For all the technical specs and details, you'd probably want to go to Tec Labs website. I'll link to all that stuff below, so you guys can check that stuff out. This is the model number of the horn tweeter. Man, the differences that Al makes as far as these tweeters are concerned are just night and day compared to what Bob was experimenting with prior, because you get so much more volume. One of the problems that you have with some of these super tweeters on the market is they don't have enough efficiency, despite what they say, to be loud enough to even be audible in the sound chain. It's just like, what's the point of even having it? It's so little, So these really made a huge improvement with that. Now, there's two different ones. The smaller ones are for the system that Bob has at home, and then the larger one is for the studio here. But we discovered some really interesting things between the two of them. Now, what's interesting is that this particular horn, this is the 10-inch horn, okay, and it has different settings. You got one for 3,000 hertz on up, one for 6,000 hertz on up, and one for 9,000 hertz on up. The volume control on the right, that's so you can adjust the loudness that you want it to be. The left knob just handles the frequency. Bob and I determined that we just felt it was nice at 3,000. There was no need to go any higher with it. Now, this is really interesting when you listen to the 10-inch horn versus the 7-inch horn. First off, the 7-inch horn is about $1,200. The 10-inch is, I think, around $1,800 in price.
But the way they disperse sound is quite interesting between the two, the way they differ. And I'm going to go over that in just a second. Now, something I want to bring up with you guys about the Silver 8 from Lee Audio. By the way, Lee Audio's prices, I'm sorry to say, they've just gotten really, I don't know. I'm just, the whole pricing with Open Baffle has just gotten absurd now, and I just don't think it's the great deal it once used to be. But the Silver 8 does not handle, even though they rated at something like 20 kilohertz or something, they're smoother. You can hear more information coming out of them. It's just no contest. So we see the Silvers, by comparison, now sound kind of more like a mid-range kind of speaker. They just don't have that beautiful clarity in the top end. And the thing too is that Al, when he did these things, he asks what the information is about the particular components and things that you're using. There's something about the way he does these things that he matches them to work with your gear. That's the thing, Bob spent a lot of time making everything work for his setup, and you can't just mix and match things. This goes back about what I said. When you get in this high-end audio stuff, it's sort of proprietary. You can't just go mixing things like the way you would think. Something I'm learning about the way horns are designed, because obviously I'm not an expert, it's not what I do, but I will just tell you from my empirical listening experiences that the more focused or smaller the horn is, the way how narrow that projection is, the more focused, like say a trumpet will sound. Okay, so what happens, this is so interesting when you listen to the 7-inch and the 10-inch, the 7-inch sounds more focused, so it projects forward, but it has a smaller sound stage. By comparison, the 10-inch behind it has a larger sound stage, but doesn't sound as focused. So it's kind of a trade-off. But if you didn't have one or the other, you wouldn't really know, right? But when you compare them, then you can hear it, how it's audible. And this is why, I have a few audiophile friends. I don't even bother talking to them anymore, discussing this stuff anymore, because there are many people who believe that you can just go based on measurements and not listen to this stuff, and they come up with all these opinions, but they don't do the work. Bob has done so much work to make this system function. He has cost money, made mistakes, myself included, to get to this stage. So what the point I'm making here is that we did an experiment using both the horns together. So we had 4 horns in the center, and man, it is so cool. Because then you get the focus from the smaller one, and then you get the wide sound stage from the 10-inch one. And it is so cool when they're in combination. Now again, I just want to reiterate, you don't have to have both of these horns. You probably won't notice it, what you're missing or gaining, if you only have one of either, right? It's only when you have them both side by side that you start to notice the differences. I want to reiterate again. The 10-inch projects a bigger sound stage, but gives the effect that it sounds a little bit further in the background of the stage, whereas the front 7-inch here, it's like more focus and more in your face kind of thing. So they're really both great, Now here, I want to just give you the overall impression, okay? And then you guys will hear the sound demos later as we proceed. The information that comes out of them, how smooth they are. Bob spent some time working with those other super tweeters that everybody talks about on YouTube channels and stuff. Listen, we don't get anything for free. This stuff is all paid for. We're not here sponsored by companies. We just genuinely care. We just have a great interest in doing this. It's fun. Now, I know some of you are probably asking yourselves, how do they compare to the Shinjitsu Horn 2+2, the one that I'm using on the Eclipse Heresy project that I've been working on that you guys have seen in those various videos? Well, it's actually like comparing apples and oranges. They're just completely different situations here. Because you have to remember that these horns are designed anywhere from 3,000 hertz on up, with the 10-inch, and 5,000, I think, on up with the 7-inch horn. So the frequency range isn't the same, and it's a different situation as far as the sensitivity is concerned. And when Al does these horns, he has to match them with whatever gear it is that you're using. And you remember on the Shinjitsu horn, it's 1300 hertz, more of a specific application I was trying to do. Bob and I did take these horns and try them on the Heresy regardless before we even got the Shinjitsu horn. And it was kind of redundant. It just didn't make sense, and the Shinjitsu had to be used to just do a completely different frequency range. But for existing open baffle speakers, for those of you who own open baffles, and you're using like the Lee Audio Silvers or the 8-inch the 8-inch drivers from Lee Audio, man, you should strongly consider this as an addition, because there's a good deal of information that's missing from the top end with the Lee Audios by themselves. They're just not. It's just not going to compare, to the horns, adding these horns on top of it. So I hope that answers that for you. Now here we have a Crown K, a 500 watt per channel solid state amplifier at 8 ohms. And this is used to control the open baffle woofers, the 18-inch Lee Audio open baffle subwoofers. And this here is a crossover network, and it's basically to handle all of the frequencies for that open baffle driver. We have a separate subwoofer. I'm going to go into that in just a moment. But the difference is that this made were really phenomenal. OCD Mike was absolutely correct about that. And, you just don't know until you try it. And the bass is just really tight. It's controlled. It's deep. It's powerful. There's no distortion. It's extremely clean. This little converter on the right is just to convert it from RCA to XLR. So here you can see the open baffle subs here. And these are bi-amped. That's all this amp is for, is just to drive just these 18-inch subs. So it's very impressive. Definitely makes a difference. Listen, if you don't have enough power going into it, you can actually hear distortion. And we don't get that with this. It's very clean, really good power. Now here is just something that seems like blasphemy, going against the conventional audiophile wisdom. This is a Power Sound Audio 18-inch sub. And, the first time I ever heard this, I was very skeptical because I'm not a big fan of big subwoofers. But the gentleman, Chris, that introduced me to this sub blew me away when he demonstrated it for me. Now, he plays underground rave music. So he's a real specialist in that department. He doesn't play jazz. So my concern was, hey, how is this thing going to pan out for jazz? Is it musical and whatnot? Man, this guy schooled me on subs like it was nobody's business. And I thought I knew about subs until I talked to this guy, and he just blew me away. I contacted Bob and I said, man, you got to come hear this thing, because he is demonstrating something that I didn't believe. Now, the gentleman that runs this company used to work with SVS. And what he did is he ended up branching out on his own. And these, I believe, are significantly less than what SVS charges. These are like industrial subwoofers. But the thing that blew me away the most was the speed. It's shocking, man. I'm telling you, I was under the impression that we just couldn't get the speed out of this thing, but I was just dead wrong. It's just the opposite. The speed, the accuracy, the attack, it was just wicked fast, man. And he was playing these underground songs that demonstrated this. You'll see that it's sitting next to the couch, right? And you're sitting and saying to yourself, why is it sitting right next to you? Now, Chris, the gentleman that introduced me to this sub, man, this guy, he knows everything about setting up subs. And what he did is he placed the sub at his house next to the couch. And I think he had it something facing the side of the couch, approximately 6 inches away. And the thing that shocked me was the immediacy that this thing delivered in this location. And I said, well, why don't you have it up in the corner or something like that? He says, because you get phase issues with that. And I said, okay, I just listened to it. And when I heard it next to the couch, that just threw me for a loop. I could not believe the impact and speed, the immediacy of it. But I'm having this revelation with these subs that I was not aware of in the past. And it's just really opened my mind to the capability of large subs when done correctly. And this guy is just an expert at doing subs. And I said, look, why don't you do a tutorial on my channel? He's like, no, man. He's kind of uncomfortable in front of the camera and talking about it. But the guy demonstrated something that I was not aware of. And, the proof's in the pudding. You got to play the music. So at that point, I asked Chris if he could play some kind of blue. And when I heard the jazz and I heard the bass, the subtleties of the bass and everything, it was just beautiful. And I said, I contacted Bob. I said, we got to get this thing in the studio and put it in there because it's too good. It just sounded too good to deny. And we've been using it ever since. So let's get on with the demos. I hope you guys enjoy it. And thanks for watching.
She wears her sadness so well, like an old pair of shoes. Can't better throw away. She won't take my embrace, hides away in a shell, just like a rose with a thorn. She wears her sadness so well, like an old pair of shoes. Can't better throw away. She won't take my embrace,
I'll kiss your mouth and swallow you whole. Been holding my claim like an old 49er, wayward and skinny, for dust in the moon from that holy water coming down. Out of our way now, we're going for gold. Been holding our claim just like old 49ers. Out in the city and into this room from that holy water